Welcome back from the break, back to the ultimate debating contest. Today we have two teams with us, Freedom Fighters and Argumentum, debating on the topic of euthanasia. So in case you didn't hear it before the break, this phase is all about the conversation between both teams. One team is going to start off with a point and the other team is going to attempt to counter it. And we're going to go back and forth until I call a stop to it, and then I'm going to ask the other team to come with their starting point. So this phase mainly is about how the contestants interact with each other and how they attempt to put down their opposition team's points and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Team Freedom Fighters to come with your first starting point that you want to make. And remember, in this phase you're talking to each other, but the judges will be looking out for how you talk, and as Mr. El-Ghanem said, how patient you are while the opposition speaks also. So Team Freedom Fighters, would you like to begin?
Euthanasia devalues some lives. Accepting euthanasia means accepting that some lives are worth less than others. Legalizing euthanasia will send a message that it's better to be dead than to be sick or disabled.
Okay, thank you very much, Samira, for that starting statement. So now you guys, you're going to have to come up with a response to that point. So would you like to do so?
So you say that it's better to be dead than to be alive. But if you are going through an immense amount of pain and it's unbearable, do you still think it's worth being alive rather than being at peace?
Okay, so she's saying that would you want to live your life in a lot of pain, or would you rather just be in peace, dead?
Our next point is that
oh wait, so you want to start your next point now? Don't you want to give a response to that?
Oh, do we give a response? Okay, so our response to what you have said is that there is a lot of care done for people with a terminal illness. So I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but there is hospices, which is a specific hospital designed to help terminal illness patients. And what they do, they do several different things, like giving workshops for like mental health care, and also they do provide lots of painkillers for what they are suffering for. So I don't think it's right to say that if they are terminally ill, they have no option and their life is just completely suffering. I don't think that's true.
Okay, so Freedom Fighters are saying that there's specific places where they can help people with terminal illnesses, so you don't always have to result in killing them. What would your response to that be?
So my response to that is the fact that so these hospices, they have this thing called palliative care, so I'm pretty sure that's what you're talking about. So in palliative care, people are given treatments to ease the pain, right? But the problem is think about when you take a paracetamol, right? That's a form of painkiller. When you do that, it does give you some sort of relief, but sometimes the pain is just too much for that to be enough. So when palliative care isn't enough, euthanasia is definitely the next alternative. But if that's not legal, what are they supposed to do? Yeah.
Would you guys like to respond to that, or should I move on to the next point?
Well, I do think that painkillers may sometimes not necessarily always work, but I don't think that we should result into that particular patient wanting to die because there's not an option yet. I think that we should focus more on creating better doctors, giving a better education to them, and trying to discover more options, more opportunities, more different medicines and things like that, to be able to help them so that they feel like there is a hope. I mean, as a patient, don't you want to feel like your doctor is your sense of hope? So shouldn't the doctor not be saying there's an option for euthanasia, which is, if anything, it's making them feel like they are worthless because their whole entire case is unsolvable, said by the doctors.
Thank you very much. I'm going to end that string of debate there. So now they've given one of their starting points, so now it's your turn to give one of your starting points, and we're going to expect a response from you after. So would you like to give your starting point?
I believe that everyone should have the right to die. They have the explicit right to die, so whether they want it or not, we should respect their decision.
that they are making.
Okay, everyone should have a right to die. What's your response to that?
Yeah, but other people have right too. Like, euthanasia is seen as, like, it's viewed from the perspective of the person who wants to die, but it also affects, like, the people surrounding them, like the families, the friends, and the staff workers.
Okay, so although a death may be what they want, is that truly what is good for the health of their family also?
So in response to that, I want to say that okay, so the family are there, they're watching them being in pain, but the problem is the family are actually there, they're watching. You imagine watching your loved one in pain and you're seeing them day in, day out, and at the point at which they want to die, and if you're not letting them do that, you're stopping them from, being relieved of the pain. And obviously as family members, you want the best for them, and if the best is that they would be relieved from the pain by dying, that's you should respect their decision.
So what would your response to that be?
I would like to say that because of a terminal illness, obviously the patient themselves would be struggling, and in several scenarios they will be going through things like depression. And I don't think that immediately saying euthanasia is an option is very good for the patient, because they might change their minds later. They might feel too pressured once the doctor is about to carry on the procedure, and if they do feel like they might change their minds, or if they just feel like at the state that they are in, clearly they are suffering, are they really in a state where they can make a rational decision?
So someone who's terminally ill might not even be in the right state of mind to make the perfect decision. So what would you say to that?
Well, if they aren't in the right state of mind, there are going to be many processes and regulations where they'd have to go through counselling and things like that. As well as if someone is in depression and they're really adamant about wanting to kill themselves, they are more likely to go and do it themselves and attempt suicide. And that's just even more painful for them. If they wanted to jump off a bridge, that's so much pain, rather than if someone just gave them a pill to end their life. It's just easier for them as well.
Okay, so not giving someone the means to die easily might lead on to them actually attempting to commit suicide. But I'm going to end that string of debate there, and now we're going to come back to you guys again. I want you to give me another one of your starting points, and we can move on from there.
Allowing voluntary euthanasia makes it easier to commit murder, since the perpetrators can disguise it as active voluntary euthanasia. Regulation in such a big procedure is difficult. Lack of control, lack of trust, loss of hope. Euthanasia makes life disposable. It could be the first step on a slippery slope. The slippery slope argument is based on the idea that once a healthcare service, and by extension the government, starts killing its own citizens, a line is crossed that should never be crossed, and a dangerous precedent has been set. The concern is that a society that allows voluntary euthanasia will gradually change its attitudes to include non-voluntary and then involuntary euthanasia.
Okay, so voluntary euthanasia would eventually lead to a slippery slope where involuntary euthanasia begins to become accepted. What would you say to that?
As I said before, in the Netherlands, 0.8% of the people there committed euthanasia without the consent of the patient, whereas that reduced by 50% when they legalised euthanasia because of the framework and the strict guidelines. That meant that they can't just do things like that.
Actually, I found out that there were, in Netherlands, when euthanasia was legalised, there were 1,000 deaths that was unreported, and it wasn't even voluntary. The doctor just killed them because they believed that they didn't have the right to live. So you never know if the patient actually genuinely want to die, because it could be all biased, and you just genuinely, how would you really know that the patient genuinely do want to die?
Okay, so a clash of statistics here. So even though there may be frameworks, there can always be problems within the frameworks, which could lead to, as she said, 1,000, I believe, unreported deaths. What would you say to that?
as in the problems in any framework. Also, so you're saying that if we legalize euthanasia, as you said before, in the Netherlands, anyone could just say, okay, anyone could get away with murder by just murdering someone and say, okay, this is euthanasia, this is what they wanted. Whereas if we do legalize euthanasia, then we'll go through the actual correct process and regulations.
Do you have any response to that?
I still do believe that even if there are processes and frameworks that are in place for euthanasia, then there would still be exceptions to that process. And I don't think suggesting that if it wasn't there, then suicide would increase. I think that suicide wouldn't increase if people had the correct medicines and the correct treatments and the correct support if they were terminally ill. So I don't think you should be saying that
what they said was that frameworks are better than having no framework, because if you have a framework, then everything can be done and it can be watched over, rather than some people being killed and then their excuse being euthanasia.
Well, like I said before, how do you really know if that person wants to die? Because there could be a lot of pressure from the family and others. Like, for example, the sick, like the families or the friends might see the sick person as a burden that they don't wish to carry, and they might put pressure to the sick person and they ask for euthanasia. And this could increase the number of examples of the abuse or neglect of elderly people by the families, making them feel an important issue to consider.
Okay, so that string of debate has showed us the argument between whether frameworks do truly provide a good way of letting someone come to their death, or does it just provide another pathway for people to end up dying without any actual cause. Okay, so we're gonna have one more string of debate for this phase, and I want you to give your second starting point, and we can go on from there.
So we have a really big issue about the fact that there's mercy killing, which is when you kill animals, but they don't really give consent. Whereas here the person, just like a quick rephrase what you said, voluntary euthanasia is it's the biggest chunk of euthanasia, right? So it's where people give consent. Most of the time, even when people give consent, if it's not legal, they're not allowed to, carry euthanasia, even though they've given explicit consent. So it's usually in written form. Whereas animals, we kill them as an ethical way of, relieving them of pain, but even though they don't give consent. Yeah.
Well, what you're saying is that you're comparing a human to an animal. Now, I think it's really difficult for you to hear a dog to say, yes, I want to die, when they're suffering. So I don't think you can actually say it like that, because it doesn't really reflect how humans behave and how animals behave.
So animals are not the same as humans.
What I do want to say is that it's not the fact that we're comparing animals to humans. We're comparing just the specific consent part. It's not that fine. It's fair enough. The animals in pain, humans in pain. The only thing I'm trying to compare is that it's from the flip side. So the animal doesn't need to give consent, whereas we expect that the animals are in so much pain that it's better that they die. Whereas when the person in respect with a human being, they actually say that they want to die, and the doctors do diagnose them as being terminally ill. So there's all this evidence backing up the fact that they should be allowed to die, but we're not allowing them to do that. So that's the main point.
So there is a lot of evidence supporting that people should be put to rest, but we're not giving them the option to do so. What would you say to that?
What if a person is not, they're not able to talk or communicate with the doctor, told them that they want to die, but they can, actually write it out, or by any other means they can actually tell the doctor that they would like to be put to rest, but the doctor does not know this. So the doctor's just assuming that they should be put to death when they're actually, in the position of, not being in the right state of mind of actually telling them that they are not they can't be taking the pain any longer.
So what do you do when someone can't go through all that procedure and can't sign the papers? What do you do then? Do you just kill them without actually taking their consent?
Well, obviously you'd talk to their family and talk to their next of kin, as that's obviously the person that they trust. also you said something about like how they don't have, if they can't speak, or if they can't, you know, if they can't speak and things, and if they can't give like that they want to do this. But in like elderly wards in hospitals, there's something called DNAR, where it's do not attempt resuscitation, and if someone's really elderly, attempting to resuscitate someone can really actually make them feel more like cause them more pain, as you're actually putting pressure on their heart, and they might not want that. I mean, what's the point of keeping them alive if, you know, if they're going to go through all of that pain?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to call the end of this phase here, unfortunately. So we have found a lot out about euthanasia. I'm sure the judges have got a lot to look at going into the next phase, and a lot of questions to answer. And also they've seen how you guys speak as individual contestants, so that will be good for when they decide who the winning team is and who wins the Best Speaker award. So make sure you stay tuned, because next up we have the judges' questions, and also we have the final decision for who won the debating competition, the debating contest today on Perspective.